Today, it is finally time to update our Rise of Kingdoms tier list for open field PvP in 2026. This is my outdated tier list from November of 2025, so it has been about 5 months since we've updated the tier list here, and as you guys know, a ton has changed in Rise of Kingdoms since then with the introduction of Sun Tzu Prime and the Wedge 2 formation. So we've got a little bit we have to talk about. We have to update the old commanders here on the tier list, and then we have to add the new commanders. We'll talk about where they go and why, and we'll also talk a little bit maybe about the future of this tier list, because as you know, we do have archer commanders right around the corner. But before we jump into any of that, what's going on, guys? Cheers. Now, as you guys know, I am a sponsored partner trader with Rise of Kingdoms, so if you want more Rise of Kingdoms content, consider subscribing down below, and if you appreciate updated tier lists, consider dropping a thumbs up down below and use the new hype feature because it does help out the channel a ton. Also, at the end of the video, I'm going to be announcing the 13 winners of my gem giveaway that I announced just over a week ago, so stay tuned for that. Okay, now the first thing we're going to do is update the older commanders on this tier list so that way you guys kind of know where they're at here in 2026, because some of these commanders definitely need to be a little bit lower on the list. Now, I do want to remind you guys that this video is, first of all, open field PvP. Okay, so we're not talking about rally and garrison, and this also is not necessarily an investment tier list. This is basically how strong are they right now? Are they good? Are they not good? Right? And so if you have some of the commanders that are higher on the list and they're powerful and you want to use them, great, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you should go out and invest in them right now. Okay, and of course in future videos I will give you guys investment advice. Okay, now the first thing we have to do is, if we take a look at the C tier, I think a couple of these older garrison commanders, they need to come down a bit. Okay, so let's bring down Tokugawa, let's bring down Choyong, even Scipio Emilianus as a rally commander. Like, these commanders just, they're never used in the open field, right? I mean, they're really not, and so they don't deserve to be in the same category as some commanders that arguably could be used in the open field, like Charles Martel, like Gorgo. Some people still use Trajan, right? And even hypothetically speaking, commanders like Artemisia, even though she's so old, with her AoE probably could outperform some of these newer rally garrison commanders. And just as a reminder, commanders like Tokugawa only have 10% march speed, 10% defense, and their attack, it's a bonus that you only get for 4 seconds on a basic or counter attack. And then when you look at Scipio Emilianus, he doesn't even get any health unless he's leading a rally, right? So in these scenarios, like, first of all, these commanders are not built for the field, but even if you tried to force yourself to use them because their active skill deals a lot of damage, like for example in the case of Scipio Emilianus, you're just disadvantaged in so many other ways. Okay, so we're gonna move those down a little bit. The rest of the C tier is like, you know, are you gonna ever see any of these commanders in a 3-army lineup of a particular troop type? No. Maybe if you were like running 4 or 5 of a particular troop type, you might see some of these commanders, but if you're being extremely generous, you could make an argument for using them over some of the commanders in D tier. That's kind of how I'm looking at it. Moving on to the B tier, do any of these commanders need to be moved down? I think Bertrand needs to be moved down. I've been pretty generous to him, keeping him in B tier strictly because he got the combo damage rework, but even with that, we just don't ever see anybody using him, unlike with CJ, right? Chook is a commander that got a smite damage rework, and we do actually see some people using Chook in the open field, and so for that reason I'll leave him in B tier. Then when we look at commanders like Justinian and Tarek, I mean, on paper they're actually not horrible, but they are not doing the right type of damage anymore. Unfortunately, cavalry is pretty much all in on combo damage and infantry is pretty much all in on smite damage, and so when you have these commanders that they're not even really built for the field, they just so happen to work there back when they came out because of their high damage, and they did actually have some stats for the field, unlike the newer rally garrison commanders. They worked for a while, but it's just increasingly hard to justify their involvement even when you're stretching it and being generous, so we kind of have to move them down. In the case of Boudica Prime, she is super outclassed, but at least she still has the damage type that works with her troop type, so we'll give her that. The same thing applies to Zhang Yu here. Unfortunately, I have a soft spot for Zhang Yu because he has a lower rage requirement, he has AoE defense reduction on the AoE, and the rapid fire nature of that AoE historically has made him kind of hang on by a thread. But let's be real, his damage factor has been super power crept. He's all in on skill damage. He even gets a skill damage bonus on the expertise, which is pretty much useless for cavalry at this point. And from a stats perspective, he's been power crept, he's a glass cannon, and when he's surrounded he slows himself down, which is like the worst thing that you would want for a glass cannon, and so he has to just get pulled down. There's really no way around it. It is what it is. Now I'm leaving Mehmed here strictly because of his versatility. Like, you could just use him anywhere, and while his skill damage has been super power crept at this point, point. Obviously he does still have 40% universal health and an extra 10% skill damage, and so his stat spread is actually pretty nice, right? Like if we put this into perspective, right, if the next archers came out and they had 40% health, 20% attack, 30% skill damage, you'd be like, damn, that's actually insane. Right now, again, his skill damage is power crept and he doesn't have any march speed, but for pure versatility reasons, I'm leaving him here in the B tier. I think David frankly does need to be upgraded to A tier. I think he is a cut above the rest of these commanders. I know he really is kind of like a third cav march type of guy, but at the end of the day, I still feel like cavs are struggling a little bit to flesh out 3 marches, whereas when you look at somebody like Chook and you could say, okay, well, he belongs in the 3 army lineup for infantry, it's like, maybe, but we've got other options. Whereas with cavs, I think you're more likely to use David, in my opinion. Over the last couple of months, we did see Nebu get a museum relic, which is like, it's not enough to bump him up, but I'm not going to bump him down. I'm just going to leave him where he is. Belisarius Prime is something you could use to swarm stuff down, and so like I think the rest of B tier is fine. Guan Yu stays here strictly because the silence is devastating and his skill damage hasn't been completely power crept yet, even though it's definitely on the low end. You still see Guan Yu in things like Canyon, for example, so he's gonna stay here. Honestly, I'll move Chook up to the top here. I'll even bump Nebu up over Guan Yu. Really, I wouldn't put too much value in the order with which I have these. I'm kind of like rough draft putting them in order, but I would say if they're within the same tier, you could kind of make an argument to put them higher or lower depending on your personal account. What gear do you have, what armaments do you have, etc. Moving on to the A tier, I actually feel like there's not that much that I have to change here. I think obviously Attila is pretty high up on the A tier right now. If you have him, you really love him, but there's not a real reason to get him right now. So again, this isn't an investment tier list, it's just kind of how are they doing at the moment. I think if we are going to bring anybody down, ironically, I think it's Nevsky. I honestly don't know anybody who still uses Nevsky. I mean, if you're still running a skill damage cavalry lineup, it's gonna be Hua with Arthur or it's gonna be Hua with Joan. There's just no real reason to run the Nevsky. The only people that are running the Nevsky, I would say, are people who skipped Hua and never got him and are just using Nevsky Joan or Nevsky Arthur, which is fine, but we're kind of splitting hairs here where like even amongst the skill damage calves, which you're probably not using, he's still not even the most used single target commander there. So it's just, we kind of have to bring him down, which kind of sucks, but it is what it is. We also have to bring William Wallace up to the S tier, kind of just because of Sun Tzu Prime, and we'll talk about that in a second, obviously, when we add him to the tier list. But if you're running 2 pairs of infantry commanders in the field, you're probably running William Wallace somewhere in that lineup. And so this is kind of like foreshadowing for when we talk about Sun Tzu Prime. He's like, if he's so good that he makes me bring up William Wallace, then it's like, yeah, you know, he's Giga Chad. Okay, now when it comes to the S tier, I do think that there's kind of only one adjustment we have to make, and that is Ragnar Scipio kind of have to come down. And it's funny, right, because compared to the last time that I made this tier list, they're actually stronger. If you have wedge 2 formation, then you've got a stronger Ragnar Scipio than you had 6 months ago, right, which is kind of insane to think about, but at the same time, the writing is just on the wall, right? I mean, this commander pairing is too slow in the open field, and we're not going to be getting, most likely, I mean, anything can happen, but the future of skill damage infantry is all but confirmed to be going away. There's just, you know, this is the last hurrah. If you're running Ragnar Scipio right now and you went all in on wedge 2 formation for infantry, first of all, you better be a whale because that was a mistake, but second of all, enjoy this small advantage that they get because this is probably the end of the line. Now, I don't want to say that with 100% certainty because we could see, you know, for example, later this year when we get a special KVK story, I expect to see probably an archer commander there coming along that special KVK. But if we also get a second commander like we did with Achilles and Hector, then if that second commander is an open field leadership that just so happens to work really well with skill damage infantry, right, like that scenario is there's a non-zero chance of that. It's low, but it's not zero. So, you know, I could easily see a world where we continue to see either Ragnar or Scipio in the future depending on some things coming down the pipeline, but I wouldn't necessarily bet on it and I wouldn't make any investment decisions based on it. So if you are a giga whale who has wedge 2 formation for open field infantry, that's crazy, okay, but you might actually put them up in the S tier, right? I think that would be fine. I could imagine a world where, like in my current KVK, I bet this commander pairing would do super well given the matchup that we have, right? That being said, I think for most people it's it's just a little slow, right? Tanky as it might be, with all the damage factor it might have, especially on Ragnar, it's just a little slow. And so you're going to be the last to enter the battle, you're going to be the last to leave the battle, you're the most likely to get caught off guard and swarm down. Like, it just, in reality, they do end up working out a little bit worse than other things. With all of that being said, I will bring up William Wallace here a little bit. I will bring up Gangnam Chan here a little bit as well. Honestly, I'm kind of inclined to bring down Hua Joan as well. I know it's like maybe a little controversial because we did just get, again, wedge 2 formation, and we got the slight buff to the support tree for Joan, which is nice, but like, I don't know, man. It's kind of the same thing as Ragnar CPO. It's like, if you're getting great reports out of them right now, it has a time limit, and nobody should be getting wedge 2 for these commanders either. So like, I kind of want to leave Hua here in the S tier just because some people are running Hua with Arthur right now as your wedge 2 cavalry damage army, right? Like, I think that's fine. You could make that argument. So I think we'll compromise and leave it here. I think it's just weird, right? Because like, point for point, Joan is probably a better commander than Hua, just strictly from damage output. But like, when you look at what Cavs need, it's actually more so tankiness, and the faster skill cycle here with Hua is what works. So even though he's outputting less damage than Joan, the defense works really nice there, and he's got the skill damage bonus for King Arthur. So I'll kind of compromise here. If you wanted to swap Hua with Joan here on this tier list and go like that, I think you could make that argument as well. I almost would like to put these commanders in between S and A tier. That's kind of how I'm feeling. Same thing with the Ragnar CPO, quite frankly. Like, I think they're better than everything else in this tier, but they're worse than everything else in this tier. So that's kind of where I'm at. And again, you could make an argument either way depending on how your account is built, right? If you've got wedge 2 for Cavs or for infantry, you're going to feel that this is completely unjustified. But for everyone that doesn't, then you're like, oh yeah, well, probably should be an A tier, right? Looking at S plus tier, I think really I am going to move down Zhuge Liang, not because I think he's significantly worse, but just because when you look at like, what are people running right now, a lot of people are opting to run the YSG over the Zhuge Liang just because they want the damage, right? And like, point for point, I do still think that most likely the right play is to run the Emperor Qin with Zhuge Liang, because your other marches will perform better with that debuff on the active skill with ZL. But at the end of the day, we're looking at shoulds, right? You should be running this, but what are people actually running, right? Like, that's kind of what you have to look at. And so for that reason, plus the fact that Zhuge Liang has no march speed, right, which is like a pretty big deal, and neither does YSG. But like, again, when we're comparing him to YSG, an old KVK1 commander, right, like, that's kind of the state that we find ourselves in. It's just the way that archers are right now with Emperor Qin is kind of weird, because if Emperor Qin didn't work the way he did, YSG would be probably an A tier, right? But just because of how much value you get from the 50% skill damage, it's like, it just is what it is. You're just going to run the YSG, right? So that being said, we also, like I said, are expecting new archers, and those new archers will probably be an S plus tier. I mean, obviously I'm speculating, we don't know what it is, right? It could be like Belisarius Prime, but for archers, right? It's like slightly better than Hua, single target. Like, it could be bad, right? So I don't know, we'll have to wait and see. But that's kind of what I'm expecting. I'm expecting the next archers to be decent. You know, maybe they'll output less damage than these commanders, but maybe they'll be a little bit more tanky, maybe they'll be a little bit faster, maybe they'll have a buff or a debuff, like maybe they'll do something else that makes them a little bit better. Kind of like with Gangnam Chan, right? Like, he by himself is actually not that good. Like, his single target damage is not that good, his stats aren't through the roof. It's just his healing is unique. It's the only type of healing we've seen in the game like that, and it actually works really well for cavalry because they need that tankiness so badly that he ends up working well for that reason. But we'll have to wait and see. If the next archers come out and Zhuge Liang works really well with them, he might find himself an S plus again. But again, I'm kind of just snapshot in time right now. I feel like Zhuge Liang's lack of march speed and comparable usage to a season 1 commander makes me feel like he can't really be an S plus tier. He can, even if point for point he is super good, it just is what it is, right? Okay, with all of that being said, let's add the new commanders that have landed in the game since this tier list was made. Okay, the first thing we have to do is we're going to put the new gathering commanders in F tier. Everyone knows that if they're a gathering legendary, they just don't belong in the battlefield. There's not much we have to say there. Like, that's just where they go. Next up is Matthias, who is kind of just a slightly better Lapu Lapu, and by that I mean he's like a slightly higher damage output city garrison commander. And so would you ever use him in the field? No. So I'll put him at the high end of D tier, the same tier that we find Lapu Lapu. But like, you know, when you compare that to the rest of C tier, it's like, bad as some of these commanders may be, they're probably still going to get used over Matthias in the open field. Like, what are we talking about? Okay, next up is Afonso. And Afonso I was kind of bullish on when he first landed. By that I mean that, you know, he's dealing ranged AoE damage, so even though the synergy isn't perfect with the type of damage he's dealing, I thought that through virtue of it being AoE itself, it would land him in a really high tier here, because we do see Cordoba is still the best ranged commander in the game pretty much. But unfortunately Afonso I feel like hasn't really moved the needle that much, so I'm gonna put him sort of at like the middle of the pack here for B tier. I think you might be able to make a use for him if you are a ranged player, but I don't think he necessarily finds himself in the single best ranged march in the game, so that's where I'm going to put him. If you guys want more in-depth information about ranged marches, you can check out some of the other ranged content creators for Rise of Kingdoms on YouTube, but it does seem like ranged is in a pretty bad spot right now in terms of just how they're performing and what their future looks like. I know when I went to the LA player meetup, I talked to Dark Siege, I talked to a couple of other players that run ranged, or well, I think one other player who runs ranged, and like the sentiment is pretty low, right? If you look at Mr. Siege as well, like he seems to be kind of bearish on the future of ranged too, right? Like, so it just feels kind of bad to be a ranged player right now. But either way, you can check out those content creators if you want more in-depth advice for Afonso and kind of what the current range meta is right now. But again, it seems to be in a bit of a rough spot, so we'll have to wait and see what 2026 holds, if the devs are going to really support ranged, or will they end up being more of a niche thing moving forward. Because I do think that like in the right scenario, ranged really do farm kills, but those scenarios are occurring less frequently than they were before, and the rest of the commander lineup, especially with things like Emperor Jin, is getting even stronger, right? And so ranged feel like they're being a little bit left behind, even though there's still some really great uses for them. Okay, with that being said, Ivar the Boneless, this is of course the latest and greatest infantry rally commander who surprisingly does have use in the open field, especially if you are a 3-army infantry player and you have special talented basically everything, right? You need the special talented horn especially, you might be able to make him work. With that being said, I do think I'm going to put him at the top of A tier. I want to put him in S tier because he frankly does have a lot of what you would want for a 3rd infantry march, but at the end of the day, it's very hard to fit him into a 2 infantry lineup unless your account is really stacked for infantry and you can make that work. So for most people, he's not going to be there. And when you look at the rest of S tier, like a lot of these commanders do or can find themselves in a 2-army lineup. Ivar is again in one of those scenarios where it's like, I think he's higher than A tier, but I just can't put him in S tier. I don't think he's really earned that spot, especially when we have commanders like David here in A tier as well. Like, I don't know, it just doesn't make any sense. By the way, I think David is like a little bit higher up here if we're really being honest with ourselves. But with that being said, the last commander we have to talk about is Sun Tzu Prime, right? And Sun Tzu Prime is without a doubt one of the best commanders in the game. It's not even close. Him and Emperor Qin are a cut above the rest of the commanders in Rise of Kingdoms, absolutely, for sure, 100%. From the limited fighting that I've had in my current KVK, some of my best reports have come from Sun Tzu Prime. They do seem to be on the same caliber as Emperor Qin's reports, but I will say that my Sun Tzu Prime's gear and equipment is just better, right? And so the fact that like if I have better gear and they're getting the same reports, I would say that Emperor Qin is probably the better commander. I think your mileage is going to vary, and these commanders are great for different reasons. Emperor Qin is just, it's just kill points on easy mode though, right? Like, I mean, like at the end of the day, that's how I'm feeling. It just is what it is. It's just constant 5 target AoE every single turn pretty much. Like, it's hard to beat Emperor Qin at the kill point farming game in the open field. I think Sun Tzu Prime is in some scenarios better, some scenarios worse. Infantry mains may have a better time with Sun Tzu Prime, but everybody's gonna have an easy time with Emperor Qin. That's how I'm feeling, right? Especially when you look at the fact that like he works with a season 1 commander. Like, what is like the power level there is just insane, right? So that's how I'm feeling. Also, he's got like a 4 or 5 maybe 6-second cast time on the active skills. It's absolutely diabolical what Emperor Chin is doing on the field. So Sun Tzu Prime, I personally think even as an infantry main, I think he is at best tied with Emperor Chin. At worst, he's second place, clearly better than the rest of S+ tier, right? Like these two frankly deserve to be in their own tier almost, but that's pretty much it. That's where I'm putting Sun Tzu Prime. And again, if you want to make the argument he's number one, I'm not going to argue with you. I think that's a perfectly reasonable conclusion to come to. I just personally so far haven't seen anything that makes me think, wow, he's so much better than Emperor Chin, right? At best, they're on the same level in my mind. Also, he's kind of single target damage, kind of not. So it's just hard to argue that he's better than Emperor Chin in my opinion, even though you are going to get similar levels of results from Sun Tzu Prime depending on the scenario. Okay, now with all that being said, let's talk about the future of this tier list, right? How is this going to change when we see new archer commanders? Well, of course I can only predict, right? I can only sort of speculate on what we might see. I'm really hoping the next archer commander does have some march speed, right? And I do hope that they work with Emperor Chin. That being said though, Emperor Chin is kind of the number one beneficiary of the wedge 2 formation, and if they make a commander that is better with Emperor Chin than Zhuge Liang or YSG, then that's going to pull that march up even higher within the meta, and then it will be kind of no question that the Emperor Chin march will be outperforming the Sun Tzu Prime march. That's how I'm feeling, right? So the next archer, like, I want it to be good. Do I want it to be as strong as Emperor Chin? No, I don't think that archers need that. I don't think that makes any sense. That would just make them even more powerful, and it would just completely break the game almost. But do I want something really good? Yeah, I do. I do think that archers, you know, even though they've got arguably the best march in the game right now, I do think that their second army lineup is struggling a little bit because of the lack of march speed amongst these two commanders, right? Like maybe that's kind of how they're balancing it. Maybe that's how the devs are looking at, like, okay, well, it's a high risk, high reward type of situation where fine, you get the 5 target AoEs, it's circular, it's dominating the battlefield when it comes to farming kill points, but the downside is you're going to struggle to leave. Maybe that's how they're balancing this. I don't really know. But if we do see the next archers really pop off and they do work well, either with Emperor Chin or pulling up the power of the second archer march, I think what we're going to see is almost certainly Philip is going to fall down to A tier. I feel like Zhuge Liang is the only reason he's still even here, right? Because even if you're looking with cav marches, which I use him with my cavalry, but that's only because I don't have Hector, right? Otherwise I would be running Hector in a 2 cav army lineup and I just wouldn't even use Philip, right? And like really it's just because Philip's active skill doesn't deal damage, right? And it's only a 2-second buff on top of that. So it's really like you're really relying on the instant proc with him and the 30% all damage bonus plus the march speed, right? Which is like, he doesn't have enough stats to compete either. Like, I don't know. Philip is just, his versatility and sort of where other troop types are lacking is the only thing that kind of keeps him here. Otherwise, he does really feel like the first thing that's going to land in A tier when we see the next archers. That's my speculation. With that being said, Hermann Prime and Zhuge Liang, like maybe one of these two commanders goes down to A tier as well. It's hard to imagine it being Zhuge Liang, but like at the end of the day, the support tree is stronger now, which we do see on Hermann Prime, and he's got march speed, which is like, you kind of need that for archers right now, right? So like, I can imagine a world where the 2 army lineup for archers after this next new commander comes out is Hermann Prime plus new commander, and then you run either, like I said, the Emperor Chin with Zhuge Liang or Emperor Chin with YSG. That wouldn't be surprising to me if I'm being honest with you guys. So we'll have to wait and see. Hermann Prime is definitely showing his age a little bit, right? Like his 2000 damage factor is outclassed, not because of the damage factor, but it's only the 3 targets compared to Zhuge Liang's 5, which is like significantly better. He also is lacking a little bit in the stats department, but he has the march speed, which is like the one thing that's like really, like if this were 10% or lower, I feel like he would really be a contender for the bench already. His poison stacks do really help archers a lot still, but that's kind of it, right? Like back when Hermann Prime came out, everything was dealing skill damage, and now it's pretty much only archers. So poison is still a great debuff, but it's really just for your archer marches now, and so archer mains are going to be the primary beneficiary of the poison stacks. Although you could also make the argument that like everyone's running Emperor Chin, right? The more enemies that are poisoned, the more damage you're going to be dealing with Emperor Chin every single turn, right? Which is kind of insane. But again, I'm kind of rambling right now, and this is just speculation, so we'll have to wait and see what the next archers actually are before we make any conclusive judgments here. But again, Philip I think is the number one thing that we're going to see a bump down with that new archer release. Okay, without further ado, let's announce the 13 winners of my gem giveaway that I announced just over a week ago. For those of you that didn't see, unfortunately you missed out. Giveaway was in the title. Okay, okay? And just to recap, these are 3,000 gems a piece. There's 13 winners. They were given to me, these gems, I mean, were given to me at the LA player meetup, and I figured this was the best way to give them out. Now, the 3 requirements to win were you had to be subscribed, you had to like the video, and you had to comment your governor ID. Okay, so what we're gonna do here with Comment Draw, that's the website that I'm using. I have no affiliation with them. It's just a free way to generate randomly some winners from the comments. Okay, what we're gonna do is we're gonna generate 13 winners and then 5 backup winners in case any of the 13 didn't actually follow the rules. So that's how we're gonna do this. Okay, so let's go ahead and generate the winners. Let's drop in the video URL and we're gonna see only unique users. Let's do 13 winners, 5 backups, and that's pretty much it. We have 995 likes, 651 comments, and let's just generate the winners and see what we get here. I just saw my my actual picture popped up there for a split second. So we've got 2 winners already. It looks like they do have their governor ID. That user looks like they might not have their governor ID in the comments, so they may not be eligible to win, unfortunately. This user also might not have it. We'll have to double check because they have long comments and it's not all loading here. It looks like General does have their user or their governor ID there. Looks like Mark has his, and we've got Raven. This user might not have theirs. I'll have to double check as well. Adam, it looks like, does in fact have their governor ID, which is nice. So we're generating, we've got 10 already, we've got 11, we're generating number 12 here, and then we're going to generate the backups right after. Okay, so it looks like Mr. Gorilla might not have their ID either. So here's the backups. Okay, so in the event that some of the winners do not have their governor ID, then we will just go for these backup winners here. Okay, so some of these may win, some of them may not. I'm not really sure. I'll have to just double check. And let's see what the last one is here. And big dogs. Okay, there it is. So those are it. Those are the winners and the backup winners in case we don't have all the governor IDs. Let me just double check really quick. Okay, so I actually went through all of the comments of all of the winners and some of the backup winners as well. Unfortunately, we did have 4 comments that were winners that did not put their governor ID, which means they are not qualified to win the gems. Okay, so these 4 users, unfortunately, their comment was picked, but they were not a winner. So 4 of the backup winners actually did end up getting the gems instead. The valid comments that were actual winners are as follows. So I'm going to show all of the comments here on the screen so that way you guys know that these are real comments, these are real commenters, real YouTube channels. So that is everybody. Okay, so this is the final list. These are the 13 winners of the gem giveaway. Definitely check your inbox. I have already sent you the gems, the code that you need. I have scratched these off and I sent you the code in your messages. Okay, so if you see your player ID or YouTube name or whatever, if you see it here, check your DMs in game, and don't forget to look for the LA player meetup avatar frame. Okay, this is my governor ID. Okay, so do not get tricked by anybody pretending to be me, but also they probably won't have the LA player meetup frame anyway. But guys, that's going to do it for my first 2026 open field tier list in Rise of Kingdoms. Let me know in the comment section below what you think. Should some of these commanders be higher on the list? Should some of them be lower on the list? Let me know in the comment section below. And if you made it to the end of this video, I really hope you'll consider leaving a like on the video. It really helps out channels a ton. Use the new hype feature and double check down below if you're subscribed to the channel. You might think you are, but you're actually not. With that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Omniarch. I'll talk to you guys again soon. Peace.